10. Prehistoric Beast. On an Alabama beach in 2021, fishing guide David A. Rose pulled something extraordinary out of the water and nobody could figure out what the heck it was. The angler was shocked and confused, thinking he had somehow hooked some kind of bizarre shark on the end of his line. It had taken him nearly 40 minutes to rip the fish out of the water, and it looked like some sort of prehistoric beast from the past. He thought maybe it was a shark, but as David found out later, he had actually caught a Gulf sturgeon. These are some very rare fish and not often found lurking in the Gulf of Mexico. Before catching the Gulf sturgeon, David also caught a Gulf kingfish, a couple of stingrays, a catfish, a pufferfish, and even a crab. He was quite an experienced fisherman. He hooked the sturgeon using dead shrimp for bait. It was over 6 feet or 2 meters long and weighed around 130 pounds or 60 kilos, making it about half the size of what they can really grow to be. These fish have been around since the dinosaurs and can be up to an astounding 14 feet or 4.2 meters long. The main part of their internal skeleton is made of cartilage, very similar to a shark. But unlike a shark, their outer body is covered in bony, armor-like plates for defense. After taking a few pictures with the prehistoric monster, David threw it back in the ocean. After all, these are federally protected animals and are not allowed to be killed. Thanks, David. Number 9. The Burbot. In Lake Erie, there is a very bizarre sea creature known as the Burbot. Almost nobody has seen it, even fewer people have caught it, and most people don't even know it's there. But it is. The Burbot is a giant eel-like fish that hangs out at the bottom of the lake and is the only member of the cod family that lives in freshwater. According to Mike Durkalic, an aquatic biologist with Cleveland Metro Parks, the Burbot is a weird and secretive fish, and not many people have what it takes to catch them. In December, Durkalic caught 2 of these elusive fish in gill nets, but not just because he could. He caught them to add implants to the fish with transmitters and then release them back into the wild, allowing scientists to learn a bit more about their behavior. Lake Erie in the 50s and 60s used to be bursting with these burbot, but then came industrial pollution and the invasion of the deadly sea lamprey, which feed on the native Ohio fish. Today, there aren't very many burbot left, making them a very slippery catch. 8. Ice fishing monster. Nicholas Colangelo was out ice fishing in Pennsylvania with his friends. They were expecting to catch a few little fish and just to have a good time out on the ice. The trip they'd taken previously had been quite successful. Nicholas had caught a huge musky fish from under the ice and was hoping to net another one this time. Instead, Nicholas caught something rather unusual. It wasn't a fish, and it definitely didn't belong under the ice. What was this mysterious creature? It was a duck. Specifically, it was a very rough-looking merganser duck that probably shouldn't have been under the ice at all. These ducks can dive for short periods of time, sure, but they definitely can't dive for the whole winter. These ducks usually migrate south to rivers that don't have any ice in them. This one must have gotten stuck as the ice was forming over the lake. Then it spent the last few weeks trying desperately to get out. Nicholas may have not caught himself a giant fish, but at least he gifted the duck its freedom. 7. The Dolphin Fish. Nobody is really sure where the dolphin fish gets its name. Some say it's because the dolphin fish swims frequently with dolphins out in the ocean. Some say it's simply because they act like dolphins by jumping out of the water playfully. But the dolphin fish also goes by another name too, the mahi-mahi. The name mahi-mahi literally means strong in Polynesian, and the name originates from Hawaii, where the fish are frequently caught. These fish are some of the most fascinating to catch as they're large, colorful, and honestly just strange to look at. Dolphin fish usually have a bright golden hue on their sides and then a bright green or blue color on their heads. What's really interesting is that as they start to die, the color fades and they become dull yellow. Even though mahi-mahi can grow to be over 6 feet or 2 meters in length, they actually start life as microscopic larvae hiding in seaweed. Because of this very smart breeding behavior, dolphin fish reproduce like crazy. It's highly unlikely the species will ever become endangered, even though they are so popular with fishermen. But just because they are often caught doesn't make it easy. Like I said, their name means strong, and it takes a lot of effort just to reel one in. Have you ever fished for dolphin fish, aka mahi-mahi? Let us know your experience in the comments section down below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 6. Monster catfish. In Po Delta of Italy, a fisherman made the catch of a lifetime when he hooked a giant catfish that looked like some kind of monster from the never-ending story. The fisherman's name was Dino Ferrari, and he caught a potential world record-shattering Wells catfish that weighed over 280 pounds, or 127 kilos. It was also nearly 9 feet long, or 3 meters, making it a true monster of a catfish. What's really incredible is that according to the Seattle Times, the current record for a Wells catfish is slightly above an incredible 300 pounds, or 136 kilos. Still, Dino's fish could be the largest ever caught only using a sport fishing rod and reel, which really is in a category of its own. After taking pictures of him holding his catch, the Italian fisherman released it back into the water where it quickly swam away. The giant Wells catfish got to live another day, most likely terrorizing all the other fish that are much smaller than it. 5. Pink alien fish. In Mexico, a strange creature was pulled out of the water and mistaken for an April Fool's joke. The creature looked kind of like a fish, but also a little like a shark. It was discovered swollen, pink, and a little burnt. The fish was caught by the captain of a tourist fishing boat in Cabo named Jaime Rendon. The weird catch was made on the southern tip of the Baja California peninsula. After the catch, Jaime posted the pictures online, not really sure what the thing was. But just because it so happened to be the 1st of April, everyone thought it was just a big joke. Nobody took the creature seriously, thinking Jaime must have just made the thing up using Photoshop just to trick everyone. But then someone came forward to identify the animal. According to fish experts, it was actually a very real fish, something known as a swell shark, a very small and rather evasive shark found throughout the Pacific Ocean. It's significantly smaller than most sharks you may be familiar with, but it does have a pretty interesting defense mechanism. When it needs to evade a larger predator, it fills its belly with water to look bigger. It also inflates itself with air when close to the surface, looking more like an inflatable pool toy than a real animal. Usually, these sharks are quite shy with divers and pretty harmless unless aggressively provoked. They tend to avoid humans. Most swell sharks are a soft yellow-brown color. The reason this shark was so pale and sunburnt is probably because it had albinism, lacking any kind of pigmentation and making it pale as a ghost, and indeed, a very crazy catch. 4. Fish with a face. Recently in 2020, a fisherman in Thailand caught one of the ugliest fish in existence. He found a fish with a strange yellow body, weird white dots all over it, and a face just like that of a human, only way creepier. The fisherman caught the bizarre creature in his crab trap and almost threw it back in the water because it was so hideous and he was so shocked. He didn't know what to do with the weird catch, so he handed it over to wildlife officials because he was worried that such a disturbing fish would give him bad luck in the future. Now, it's believed the fish was a type of stargazer called Ichthyoscopus polycharis. Stargazers live at the bottom of a particular body of water, hidden underneath the sand with nothing but their eyes and mouth poking out, waiting for some unfortunate victim to swim directly over them. Their name stargazer is a little confusing because they don't actually gaze at the stars at all. They hide in the shallow waters of the Mediterranean as well as the Atlantic Ocean. The stargazer is what you would call an ambush predator, and they are very good at it. The only time their skills are lacking is when they accidentally bite onto a fisherman's hook. Not a good day for the stargazer. 3. Translucent blob. A translucent blob was captured off the coast of New Zealand and nobody could figure out if it was a plastic bag, a weird fish, or a transparent shrimp. Stuart Fraser was out fishing with his 2 sons when he spotted the strange animal floating at the top of the water and scooped it into their boat. According to Stuart, the blob felt scaly and firm in his hands, kind of like jelly, but there was nothing inside of it except for a weird orange blob that may have been one of its internal organs. Stuart had never seen anything like it before, and neither had his sons. After looking for help online, some fish experts suggested that the mysterious creature could actually be a Salpa majora, a type of fish found only in cold seas and mostly in the Southern Ocean. They can grow to be about 10 inches or 25 centimeters. They sort of look like baby jellyfish, but the two are not related, as Salpa majora are completely harmless, unlike jellyfish, and they're sometimes deadly stingers. The fish has a gelatinous body and only moves thanks to a special system of pumping water through its body. It literally contracts itself like a beating heart to slowly propel itself through the water. Other than that, we don't know too much about the fish. It eats plankton and is very rare, with hardly any sightings of the thing in the wild. 2. The blackfish. In Connecticut, a man named Tim captured a record-breaking blackfish. It happened on October 14th while Tim was out on Captain Bob Wadworth's boat. They had gone out to Two Tree Island in Niantic Bay when Tim suddenly hooked something he felt was huge. Tim had to put his reel into free spool and fight extremely hard to work the fish away from the treacherous bottom. According to Captain Bob, he's pretty used to hearing excited fishermen on his boat. But today was something a little different. From all the commotion, he knew Tim had hooked an amazing catch, but he couldn't quite anticipate turning around to see Tim holding a monster blackfish. It turned out later to be a type of tautog, and it was so huge that it weighed in at 26.6 pounds or 12 kilos, and it was later certified as beating the Connecticut state record by almost 3 full pounds or 1.3 kilos. That makes it one of the biggest tautog blackfish ever and just shy of 2 pounds or 0.9 kilos lighter than the all-time world record. Number 1. Cowfish. A fisherman in Oklahoma made a rather bizarre catch at Lake Eufaula. Austin Claunch captured a fish that looked an awful lot like a cow you'd see on a farm. Well, the colouring and pattern did anyway. The fish had a white belly and the black and white markings of an ordinary dairy cow on its back. It was such a weird thing to find that Austin posted the pictures online to see if anyone could give him a bit more information. Without getting much luck, he finally sent the picture to the Oklahoma Wildlife Department, who replied that the fish wasn't a new species or an aquatic cow. Instead, the fish was suffering from leucism, meaning it had partial pigment loss. It was basically halfway to being an albino, which explains why it was so pale and why it had a pink fin. The good news is that a lack of pigment doesn't actually affect a fish's health in any way, and it doesn't affect the way a fish tastes either. Number 10. Narcissus snake dens. Every year, tens of thousands of harmless red-sided garter snakes, Thamnopus sertalis parietalis, arrive at the Narcissus snake dens, a wildlife management area in the Canadian province of Manitoba. The snakes spend the winter hibernating in the area's natural limestone crevasses and tunnels, and at the end of the season, the snakes mate in huge orgies on the grass. It's the world's largest known concentration of the species, but it wasn't always this way. Back in 1999, after the population reached an unprecedented number of around 70,000, a bad winter killed tens of thousands of the snakes, bringing their numbers perilously low. The following year, the Narcissus Snake Den's Wildlife Management Area was established. Recognizing that many snakes died by oncoming vehicles because their migratory path crosses a major highway, workers created snake crossing tunnels and built fences to help usher them into the passageways. Since then, the population has recovered and no more than 1,000 snakes die in traffic every year. 9. Eyeless fish stranding. In early 2011, thousands of dead snapperfish, many who bore strange wounds and were missing their eyes, washed ashore on New Zealand's Coromandel Peninsula overnight. Fisheries officials acknowledged that the situation may have been deliberate and warned citizens not to eat the dead fish, although I'm not sure why anyone would need this warning, until they figured out where they came from and why. But no official explanation was ever determined, and starvation, poisoning, and natural causes were all ruled unlikely. When the same thing happened again around 2 years later, authorities still hadn't come up with an explanation for why it was happening. This time, however, they eventually ruled that an illegal fishing boat hauling in a broken net was likely responsible for the deposit of dead fish. Despite that, there was no word on whether the more recent incident was connected to the previous one. A massive cleanup of the rotting, stinking mess ensued as locals remembered the last time something like this had happened and grappled with the lingering lack of answers. 8. Raining birds. As Arkansas residents prepared to ring in the new year at the end of 2010, thousands of dead birds mysteriously rained down from the sky. About a half hour before midnight, an estimated 5,000 red-winged blackbirds, European starlings, common grackles, and brown-headed cowbirds perished over the city of Beebe. During that same week, large numbers of birds also died in Louisiana, Sweden, and elsewhere. Not surprisingly, preliminary testing on the dead birds in Arkansas ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma. In other words, they fatally crashed into various objects as they plunged towards the ground. As alarming and apocalyptic as these events seemed, scientists blamed media hype for any hysteria that came of it, and pointed out that it is relatively normal for birds to die en masse. Speaking with National Geographic, Audubon Society ornithologist Greg Butcher said that nearly half of the 10 to 20 billion birds in North America die every year from natural causes. In the case of them dying in large numbers, he explained that crashes and loud noises are two main culprits. Karen Rowe, an ornithologist with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, told Nat Geo that fireworks were set off just before the birds over Beebe plummeted to their deaths, pointing out that the affected species have poor night vision and typically do not fly in the dark. She explained that they may have already been disoriented and that the loud fireworks may have caused them to fly lower than normal. Thankfully, according to Rowe, 5,000 is a fairly small amount, considering that there are existing roosts numbering in the millions. What do you think of this? Do you believe fireworks are the #1 suspect in the bird deaths? Or is it something else? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons. 7. Mike the Headless Chicken. Surely you've heard the saying, "I'm running around like a chicken with its head cut off," but have you ever wondered if it's really possible for a chicken to do that? Lloyd Olson was a farmer who lived in Fruita, Colorado during the 1940s. One day in 1945, his wife sent him outside to retrieve a chicken to prepare for dinner. Olson took his axe to the neck of a 5.5-month-old Wyandotte chicken named Mike, but he missed the mark in the strangest way imaginable. Left with his jugular vein, one ear, most of his brainstem intact, and a blood clot that prevented him from bleeding to death, Mike was still able to walk clumsily and perch himself on branches. He attempted to engage in customary chicken behaviors, like preening, pecking for food, and crowing. Olson decided to spare Mike's life, regardless of whatever horrible discomfort the bird was probably in, feeding the bird a milk and water mixture with an eyedropper and giving him small worms and grains of corn. Mike began touring the country with a sideshow and gained nationwide fame, appearing in dozens of newspapers and magazines. For 25 cents, members of the public could catch a glimpse of him firsthand as the sideshow traveled through their area. The Headless Chicken's owner became incredibly rich, raking in the equivalent of $52,156 per month in today's money at the height of Mike's popularity. In 1947, less than 2 years after surviving a beheading and rising to fame, Mike choked on a corn kernel at a motel in Phoenix, Arizona. The Olsons had left his feeding and cleaning equipment at the sideshow and were unable to dislodge the corn kernel from his throat on time to save him. Because the brainstem controls functions like breathing, heart rate, and reflexes in chickens, Mike stayed rather healthy up until his death. But it's hard not to wonder if he truly had any quality of life without his head, and that perhaps it was for the best that he did not go on living. 6. Exploding toads. German scientists and health officials were not only perplexed, but extremely concerned when some 1,000 toads puffed up to 4 times their normal size and exploded in Hamburg's Altona district in 2011. Dubbing the site the Pond of Death, the media jumped at the opportunity to spread hype, warning people to keep their children and dogs away at all costs. Of course, people theorized about what caused the amphibians to burst, with some wondering if the toads had committed suicide, while others entertained the possibility that they had contracted a virus that South American racehorses were spreading through the region. Amphibian expert Frank Muchman solved the case after examining both living and dead specimens and found identical circular incisions on their backs. Their injuries were the handiwork of crows who had evidently plunged their beaks into the animals with an insatiable craving for their livers. Muchman pointed out that the crows are intelligent enough to understand that the toad's skin is toxic, prompting them to go after the only part they perceive as edible. He explained that the toads only know they've been attacked after their livers were removed, at which point they inflate as a defense mechanism against their predator. Unfortunately, with no liver to contain the rest of their insides, the amphibians' lungs expand disproportionately, causing them to explode and spill the remaining organs. Because the toads exploded during mating season, Muchman surmised that the clever crows had taken advantage of their distraction, adding that the pecking would have been noticeable, but not particularly painful. It wasn't the first time toads had died en masse in Germany and elsewhere, including Belgium, Denmark, and the US. And while seeing so many dead creatures is undeniably alarming, Muchman summarized the event into a few simple words, stating, "It's just a part of nature." 5. Cocoon Trees. In July 2010, Pakistan experienced an unprecedented monsoon season that brought 10 years' worth of rain in less than a week, causing massive flooding throughout the country. Even worse, the water was slow to drain and became stagnant in many areas, resulting in a so-called slow-motion disaster, in the words of Russell Watkins, a multimedia editor with the UK's Department for International Development who spoke with National Geographic. With nowhere else to go, millions of spiders and insects fled to the safety of trees, where the spiders spun thick webs, resulting in a cocoon effect. Images of the phenomenon went viral online. While people were divided on whether the cocoon trees were scary, fascinating, or perhaps both, it wasn't entirely a bad thing. Mosquito populations proved significantly lower than normal in these areas, reducing the spread of malaria and other diseases. This phenomenon has even occurred elsewhere, including in the Australian city of Wagga Wagga, where cocoon trees and even entire fields appeared after a flood in 2012. In what National Geographic described as an arachnophobe's worst nightmare, record rainfall prompted swarms of spiders from the ground-dwelling Linophidae family to flee for higher ground. Entomologist Robert Matthews told Nat Geo that the sprawling webs these creepy crawlers created, which he described as a vast trampoline, were more likely a dispersal mechanism that enabled the spiders to escape flooded areas. So, much to the dismay of anyone who is terrified of spiders, these examples show just how resilient they can be. 4. Christmas Island crab migration. The Christmas Island red crab is one of 14 crab species found throughout the Australian External Territory, which is located in the Indian Ocean roughly 240 miles or 380 kilometers south of Java, Indonesia. At any given time, there are an estimated 40 to 50 million of these creatures living on the island. The population migrates annually following the first rainfall of the wet season, which can occur at any time between October and January. During that time, millions of the crabs travel toward the ocean to mate, with males leading the way and females following suit shortly thereafter. Their precise movement is determined by the lunar cycle. They time their migration speed and spawning just before dawn during a receding tide of the last quarter of the moon, according to Parks Australia. Somehow, the creatures know exactly when this very specific window of opportunity occurs and when it's time to scurry out of their burrows. After meeting at the beach to mate, male crabs head back home while females burrow on the shore. Each female produces up to 100,000 eggs in a single season, which she then releases into the sea. These eggs hatch the moment they touch the water, then the larvae ride out to the sea with a receding tide. Most end up being devoured by manta rays, whale sharks, and other predators. Once the survivors have formed into baby crabs, they head back inland. It's rare for a large number of the larvae to survive, but it happens once or twice every 10 years, and this helps sustain the population's numbers. The annual migration attracts throngs of tourists to Christmas Island every year who gather to watch as a seemingly endless stream of the animals instinctively move to where they need to be. 3. Beached herring. On New Year's Eve 2011, tens of thousands of dead herring mysteriously washed ashore on Norway's northern coast. Nobody knew why, but initial theories included the possibility that a predator, a strong tide or a storm, had driven the school ashore, or that the fish had possibly encountered a fatal oxygen-deprived environment. The people of Kvinnes, which sits above the Arctic Circle, began pondering exactly how to clean the 22 tons, or 20 metric tons, of dead fish. Then, just as soon as they appeared, they vanished, seemingly into thin air. Experts concluded that a combination of factors caused the mass stranding and disappearance, but they were not sure exactly what those causes were and said more testing was necessary to get to the bottom of the matter. Scientists were fairly certain, however, that the reason for the disappearance of the dead fish was fairly simple, that they had simply been washed back out into the North Sea. This was supposedly not the first time something like this happened. According to Jan Petter Jorgensen, who discovered the dead fish while walking his dog, a similar event had occurred during the 1980s, but a definitive explanation is yet to be found. Number 2. Cannibalistic Lemur. The grey mouse lemur, Microcebus murinus, is an adorable primate that it's hard to believe we are distantly related to. By all appearances, lemurs and humans seem to have nothing in common with one another whatsoever. But we do share at least one trait with the creatures, as a team of researchers discovered in 2012 in western Madagascar. While searching for a tagged female grey mouse lemur, they found her dead, with a male specimen feeding on her remains. This particular species was never previously observed engaging in cannibalism, and although it had been seen in other primates, including chimpanzees, orangutans, and several types of monkeys, they had only ever been witnessed eating infants and juveniles. The discovery gave scientists their first inkling that non-human primate cannibalism is not limited to young specimens. It's unknown whether the male grey mouse lemur had murdered the female, or if he stumbled upon her remains and just took advantage of the available meal. Either way, it's quite curious, and just a little gross. Number 1. 17-year cicadas. When soil temperatures throughout parts of the US hit 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 17.8 Celsius, starting in May of this year, 2021, billions of cicadas began emerging from the ground for the first time in 17 years. Dubbed Brood X, the seldom-seen population announces its presence quite loudly, with swarms reaching up to 100 decibels. 17-year cicadas live throughout much of the eastern and part of the middle United States, making their very occasional appearances as far south as Georgia and as far north as Michigan. They burrow out of the ground through dime-sized holes en masse, with as many as 1.5 million cicadas emerging per acre, 0.4 hectares in some places. Power comes in numbers for the 17-year cicadas, who appear in throngs as a defense mechanism known as predator satiation. Of the 3,000 to 4,000 known cicada species, Brood X is unique to North America, along with another periodic species known as the 13-year cicada. The loud buzzing noise the males make, which is often as loud as a lawnmower or motorcycle, is the species' mating call. Females lay eggs inside slender tree branches, and once their work is done, the cicadas all die. When the eggs hatch, the larvae drop to the ground, burrow into the soil, and spend the next 17 years waiting to experience just a few weeks of daylight before their own lives end. 10. Attack on a shipwreck. A diver was spearfishing at the wreckage of a World War II vessel when he was stripped of his weapon and forced to get into an altercation with a shark. Captain Matt Wirt was caught on video literally fighting a shark with his bare hands while diving at the SS Papoose off the coast of North Carolina. It really doesn't get any more dramatic than that. The ship sank back in 1942 after getting smacked by a German torpedo. Ever since, it has been a playground for tiger sharks and other marine life. But these sharks weren't feeling very playful when Captain Wirt went down there with his spear and started stealing their fish. To protect their territory, the sharks attacked. They stole the captain's spear from out of his hands and tried to bite his face off. Luckily for the captain, his friend was nearby, and together they managed to fight the sharks off and make an escape. Still, the captain has since said he'll be changing his equipment for future dives in case something like this happens again and he needs to make a quick getaway. 9. Giant Goliath Grouper. The giant Goliath grouper is one of the biggest and most delicious fish in the world. It's also a horrifying thing to see swimming directly at you while diving underwater. A diver and fisherman recently ran into some bad luck when he got into a bit of a tangle with this huge fish, some of which can grow to be up to 800 pounds and over 8 feet in length, with the Florida record being 680 pounds. This fierce battle went down in the Gulf of Mexico. The diver had just speared a fish when the grouper swam up and stole it right from his hands. Not only that, the grouper tried to take the diver's hand with it. The diver's entire hand and wrist got stuck in the dangerous fish's mouth, and rather than relent his hard-earned catch, the diver reached another hand in and tried to pull his fish back. In the end, the grouper was way stronger than the pitiful human. It easily ripped the fish away from the diver and swam off with it. The diver's just lucky the grouper didn't rip his arm off too. 8. Stabbed by a swordfish. A scuba diver is lucky to be alive after getting into a confrontation with a giant swordfish. For those who don't know, a swordfish comes with a literal sword attached to its faces, and when provoked, it can use that sword for murder. The diver was walking in the darkness off the coast of Brazil, just strolling along the ocean floor, when from out of nowhere, the swordfish appeared. Without hesitation, it swam directly at the diver like a speeding bullet, and then impaled itself on the diver's oxygen equipment. The swordfish became stuck inside the mess of hoses and canisters on the guy's back, which was obviously pretty alarming. The diver needed that equipment to keep breathing. As the fish thrashed violently and tried to get itself free, the diver panicked, grabbed hold of the climbing rope, and hurried back up into his submerged vessel. He got away clean, but had the swordfish attacked him just a few inches to the right, the fish would have impaled his throat instead of his oxygen equipment. Even though it was a pretty horrifying event, the diver was still very lucky to get out alive. 7. Angry Octopus. A diver was on a trip to Japan when he was manhandled by a giant octopus. This is probably the last creature you want manhandling you on a trip to the land of the rising sun. The Russian tourist was minding his own business in the Sea of Japan when the octopus came out of nowhere, chased the guy down, and began wrapping its slimy tentacles around him. The diver tried to get away before the octopus could rip his oxygen tank off, but all efforts seemed futile. The octopus grabbed hold of the guy and tried pulling him even deeper into the sea. It was probably trying to take him away to do creepy octopus things in the dark where nobody could see. The diver did manage to get himself free of the octopus eventually, only for it to return with a vengeance and grab onto the guy's flipper, trying to yank it off. It took another minute or two, but the octopus finally did give up and retreat to the rocks below, where it changed color to blend in with the seabed, and from there, the violent octopus vanished. 6. Seal attack. Believe it or not, seals are some of the most violent and unpredictable animals that attack people underwater. An underwater cameraman was trying to get some footage of young Cape fur seals when one of them decided to try and bite his head open. The seal attacked the diver from behind, literally sinking its teeth into the top of the guy's skull. The teeth of a seal are almost like dog teeth. It was as if a large dog were gnawing on the top of his skull, almost piercing his flesh and bone with its sharp teeth. It wouldn't let up either. The vicious animal attacked again and again, always at the top of the head, something that must have been extremely painful. We don't know if the seal thought the diver's head was a fish or what, but it definitely wanted to eat it. The seal even tried eating his camera, biting the piece of equipment repeatedly. The diver did get away alive, though halfway through the attack he turned off the camera, and we don't know what happened next. Chances are, he got the heck out of there before the seal managed to rip his diving suit open with its savage attacks. 5. Deadly Moray Eel. While diving in Cayo Coco, Cuba, someone got a bit more than they bargained for when a dangerous moray eel tried to rip his nose off. In the shocking video footage, we can see a group of 5 at the bottom of the seabed next to what appears to be a shipwreck. The people were swimming alongside colorful fish, exploring the coral, and checking out the creepy wreckage. Then the moray eel appeared. It singled out one of the divers and began swimming in and out of his arms and legs like a creepy green ribbon in the water. Then, all of a sudden, the eel lunged at the guy's face. It latched on and wouldn't let go, and the diver panicked, grabbed hold of the slippery eel and threw it away from him, but the damage was already done. The diver immediately kicked off the ground and began trying to reach the surface. The eel had messed up his face mask and he was in danger of drowning. It was lucky the other divers knew what they were doing, as they quickly swam to the guy's rescue, grabbed hold of his arms and helped him move up towards the surface, while another diver tried to help fix his face mask. He did escape with his life, though that moray eel just about did him in. 4. Tangled in a fishing net. Coast Guard divers and volunteers in Italy recently had to do something no divers ever want. Diving should always be a fun and relaxing experience, just taking in the wildlife. But north of the Sicilian Aeolian Islands, divers had to participate in an operation to free a sperm whale that had gotten stuck in a fishing net. And to make matters worse, the operation wasn't even a success. It took 3 days for the divers to try untangling the poor whale, who had got its fin completely covered in greasy old fishing nets. The divers were with Sea Shepherd, a marine conservation NGO. They tried their best to free the giant mammal from the fishing nets, as it had become slow and was having trouble swimming. But because the whale was in such disarray, it was very difficult for the divers to help free her. Keep in mind that a sperm whale weighs around 15 tons and can flip its tail hard enough to shatter a person's bones. According to diver Carmelo Isgro, even after 24 hours, the whale was still putting up a serious fight. At the end of the 3 days, divers managed to get off some of the net, but had to give up as the whale vanished deeper into the sea and never resurfaced. They never saw the whale again, but hopefully it's still alive. 3. Man-eating super squid. When Animal Planet underwater cameraman Scott Castle dove into squid-infested waters, he was not ready for what came next. He was just trying to get some footage of the Humboldt squids. Instead, he ended up being on the wrong side of a vicious frenzy. This happened in the waters off La Paz, Mexico. It turned into one of the most brutal squid attacks in recorded history. Soon after entering the water, these squids began to attack. They lashed out at him with their tentacles and bit him with their beaks. This is horrifying because a squid beak can bite down with more force than an African lion, according to Animal Planet. So sharp they can rip through pretty much anything. And it wasn't just one or two squids. Scott was being attacked by an entire gang of squids. One of the squids ripped his camera away so hard that his shoulder was dislocated. Scott tried hard to get away but was pulled down. Two squids grabbed his legs and pulled him down so quickly and with so much force that his eardrums ruptured and he screamed out in pain. He finally managed to swim towards the surface with his one good arm, only to have a squid swim up and bite his wrist so hard that it shattered in 5 places. Scott finally managed to get to the boat and out of the water, but he was in terrible shape afterward and needed to be taken to the hospital. 2. Killer whales. Even more vicious and deadly than the Humboldt squid is the killer whale. After all, it doesn't have killer in its name for no reason. When a diver was spearfishing in New Zealand, he came a little too close for comfort to a pod of killer whales. His name is Sam Galloway from the University of Auckland, and he had a very close encounter with this pod of whales, which included adult and young whales. While killer whales aren't exactly notorious for attacking humans in the wild, there was an incident in 2010 when a killer whale drowned their trainer at SeaWorld, proving just how big and powerful these beasts can be. They are also notorious for attacking boats. Luckily, Sam didn't get attacked this time. Some of the younger whales got curious and came to check him out, but the bigger whales left him pretty well alone. Still, Sam was smart enough to stay out of their way, as a single bite from a killer whale could have easily ripped his body clean in half. 1. Picked on by a shark. In Egypt, diver Alexander Krinkle was harassed and picked on by a shark in the Red Sea. He was diving with his friend near Brothers Island, a place with several different species of shark. These include oceanic whitetip, grey reef, silvertip, and hammerhead sharks. In this incident, it was an oceanic whitetip shark that attacked. After diving for 50 minutes, just when the diver was about to ascend, the shark appeared. According to Alexander, the shark got very close to him, which is unusual behavior, and as Alexander swam for the rope to get back to the surface, the shark attacked. It grabbed his right thigh and tried to rip it off his body. Its teeth were so sharp that it ripped his suit open and blood immediately started leaking out from his leg. As we all know, blood in the water is not a good thing when there are sharks around. The other divers were quickly taken out of the water by their guides, while Alexander was given first aid on the boat. The shark had done some pretty good damage to his thigh, but had it been trying a little harder, it could have torn open one of his arteries and caused him to bleed to death. Fortunately for Alexander, he walked away with nothing more than a shallow bite and just a little bit of trauma. Would you dare go diving after hearing all these horrifying stories? Let me know in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and come back for more great videos.